Welcome to the Work Hard, Play Hard podcast. My name is Rob Murgatroyd, and I'm a former doctor turned lifestyle entrepreneur. Each week, I interview some of the best minds on the planet on the science of achievement and the art of fulfillment. Come take this journey with me. Excuses are over. It's time to live.
We will figure it out if we have the confidence that we'll be able to find our path. We should be confident taking the leap. This idea that I need to be able to have a livelihood that is independent of where I live was super important for me. So the days and months leading up to the move was about reorienting my life and livelihood around a geographic independence. Great athletes are not on the field thinking about the next game. They are in the moment, in the play.
Okay, before we jump into this interview, I want to invite you to be considered for my 2019 Traveling Mastermind. So go to workhardplayhardmastermind.com and fill out the application, and we'll jump on a call to see if you're a great fit. This year we'll be in Boston doing lots of cool things like training with Tom Brady's trainer, Alex Guerrero. In the middle of the year, we'll be heading to Monaco doing things like vintage car rides through the French Riviera. And then we're going to wrap the year in Florence, Italy, doing things like truffle hunting and hot air ballooning over Florence. Look, life is all about fulfillment, and I really try and walk the walk. So if you are looking to be part of our tribe of 28 high-achieving entrepreneurs that are in the 6- and 7-figure range, fill out your application at workhardplayhardmastermind.com to be considered. So think of the mastermind as having two parts. The first is the trip itself, and the second part is what goes on over the 4 days within the mastermind. Our group of 28 entrepreneurs will help you brainstorm and accelerate what you want to achieve in 2019. And we'll do that through a variety of different exercises, brainstorming activities, breakout sessions, goal-setting sessions. You know the drill. So go to workhardplayhardmastermind.com, fill out an application, and we'll jump on a call to see if you're a fit. All right, let's jump into today's episode. What's up, everybody? This is Rob Murgatroyd, and welcome to another episode of the Work Hard, Play Hard show. This episode features Russell Benaroya. Russell Benaroya. Love that name. You can find him at thebenaroyagroup.com. So, who is Russell? Russell is a guy that is on a quest for geographic independence. He is one of the best I've spoken to about discovering your zone of genius and staying in that lane. In fact, in 2018, he moved with his family to Costa Rica for a year to create a new trajectory for designing his life. I asked every question that I knew to ask him about that, and we dug into the weeds on what the challenges were, because I know a lot of people listening to this podcast are considering taking extended sabbaticals. For example, my wife and I are on our way to Europe to do a 4-month extended sabbatical. So I had a lot of interest in this. So he gets introduced as the guy on sabbatical, but in fact, he is the recent owner of a new outsourcing accounting business called Stride, and he's also an executive coach for entrepreneurs of high growth corporations. So Russell began his career in investment banking with Solomon Smith Barney and as a private equity investor at Klein Hawkes and Blue Point Capital. Russell received his MBA with highest honors from UCLA Anderson Graduate School of Business. Look, he's educated. He's a really educated guy that could have hid behind all of those accolades, but he wanted more. He wanted to challenge himself and to step into something that was unfamiliar. He was also awarded the Puget Sound Business Journal's 40 Under 40 Award in 2009. He's an active investor in tech startups. So when he's not helping other entrepreneurs succeed, he's contemplating life on 24-hour ultra trail marathons. I guess you can't call them marathons. I guess they call them ultra something or other, but I can't even imagine running for 24 hours. It's insane. So I wanted to have him on the show First and foremost, because my friend Darren recommended it, and I do anything he says. Listen to my episode with my friend Darren. It's episode number 1, and you'll see why I do whatever he tells me to do. Number 2, he is a 4-hour work week guy that isn't just talking about it. He's actually living it and doing it. And number 3, he is one of the kindest people that I've ever spoken to and one of the best listeners that I can learn a lot from. So before we get into the interview, a lot of people have been asking me about private coaching. I'm working with a select few people now that are ready to make a change in their life. Not thinking about it. Let's not jump on a call if you're like, hey, I have this idea. Call me, reach out to me by filling out an application, workhardplayhardcoaching.com, when you are ready to talk about the shift that you want to make. All right, please enjoy this conversation I had with Russell Benaroya. Russell, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on, Rob.
You know what? I am beyond excited to have you on, because any friends of the first interview on this podcast, Darren White, is a friend of mine.
He was the first.
He was my first. Yeah, we did it in South Africa together.
Wow. Yeah, he's a great guy. It's been great to get to know him.
Absolutely love that guy. So I thought what we would do is, I think a good starting off point would be to ask you if you are any relation to the Jewish philanthropist and civic leader, Jack Benaroya.
Oh, sure. Jack was the youngest brother of my grandfather. So Jack is my great uncle.
I knew that there was some blood there. Okay. I had to dig deep for that one. Well, interesting. So since we're kind of like jumping right into religion, you know, they say you should always talk about religion and politics. So let's get right into it.
Break the seal.
Break the seal. You are Jewish of Lebanese descent, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On my father's side, yes. On my mother's side, her family is from Rhodes in Greece. And so we are Sephardic Jews. So there are about 2 million Sephardic Jews in the world that hail from the Mediterranean. And I grew up with a certain type of cuisine, which is pretty distinct among Sephardic Jews. And both of my parents are Sephardic.
Very interesting. You know, Darren and I will be heading to Greece along with our wives. We go every year. It's one of our favorite places in the world. We'll be going to Mykonos, not Rhodes, but we also recently just got back from Israel together as well.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, we both fell in love with the Jewish culture. In fact, we did a DNA test, just sort of separately, you know, one of those 23andMe things. Mm-hmm. And we learned that Darren is Jewish. I don't know if he told you that, but he's Jewish. I'm not, but he is. So it's interesting.
I knew that's why, Darren. I knew that we had a special connection. It's all making sense.
And if I'm not mistaken, I believe he's Sephardic as well. So I'm going to have to confirm that. So that's just a strange coincidence, as they say. So we both fell in love with the Jewish culture and the customs. And what I want to ask you is, in what ways has Judaism or Jewish life in general helped your life?
There are degrees of observance in any religion. There are some people that are incredibly observant and abide by either the strict belief system or by the rules system. Judaism is a book of rules versus a book of faith, meaning in Judaism, it's not enough to just believe. It's about living the rules as laid out in the Torah. The Torah is a book of rules, and it's also a book of traditions. And apologies if I have a little airplane noise behind me. I am not dyed-in-the-wool observant in a highly, highly religious sense, but I am fairly consistent with the observation of the traditions that keep our people connected. And so holidays like Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, Hanukkah, which many of us know, there's a set of traditions, and these are the traditions that keep you linked to your origin. And they've just become embedded in the fabric of my life and in the life of my children. And there's a level of just consistency that keeps me connected to something that feels more important than just me.
Yep, I got it. It makes perfect sense. You know, I grew up in New York, and I was surrounded by Jews and Italians, you know? And so when I go to Italy and I meet the real quote unquote Italians, they don't look like Tony Soprano. You know, it's a whole different vibe. And when I go to Israel, they don't look like Woody Allen. It's a whole different vibe, you know? And I always love going to the culture because, you know, I'm able to really see it for what it is. And this last trip that we took to Israel, we spent a couple days in Jerusalem and then a few days in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
And, you know, on Friday night, there's a whole different vibe, man. I mean, they're in, you know, like, even though that they're not, some of them aren't home practicing Shabbat, they're out. But there's a whole different feeling on Friday night that was so celebratory, so connected, where there was like this disconnection from the week and everybody together was embracing in something. It was the first time I ever really felt anything like that. And what was also weird was Sunday was Monday, which was even weirder.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But I loved it. And I was just, you know, I was wondering how it affected your life, you know, sort of like looking at it through that lens.
Yeah, it's a really nice observation that you made. About 3 years ago, my family and I took a 2.5-week trip to Israel, and our guide was a guy by the name of Yohai. And we love Yohai, and Yohai, like many of the guides in Israel, are very knowledgeable. As you may or may not have experienced, you point to something, you're like, what's that? And they just know the story. And Yohai traveled with us with a Bible. And he didn't carry the Bible with him for like religious reasons. He carried the Bible because we would go to places and there would be historical significance, but then he would open the Bible and show us in the Bible where it talks about that place. And it was kind of cool because for me, I was always interested in the historical significance, not so much like the religious circumstance, but the historical significance, and being able to then connect what I was actually seeing then with seeing how it was written in scripture made me feel, got me out of my bubble a little bit, right? Made me feel part of such a much richer history that is, again, much bigger than me, but I have a responsibility for my kids to continue the story.
I love that. I can literally talk to you for hours about this. I'm going to have to restrain myself because there's so many questions I want to ask you, but I want to get into your story a little bit. You have a really crazy solid education. You know, you're in Seattle, Bellevue High School, and a little stint at Cambridge University, and, you know, the renowned Anderson School of Management, et cetera, et cetera. And the question I have is sort of maybe a question you haven't been asked before, but having children, having that education, and going into entrepreneurship from sort of a steady corporate job, which we're going to get into in a bit, how important do you think college is to living a happy and fulfilled life, having gone through that experience?
As opposed to not attending?
Yeah, so you've got 2 kids now, right? 2 children. Yeah. And so the question would be, is it critically important for you that your 2 children go to college? Or are you now of the opinion that it isn't for everybody I definitely learned a lot of things, but to be an entrepreneur, you certainly don't need to be there. I'm just looking at what your take is. And the reason why is because you've been down both roads. You've been down the entrepreneurship road, and you've been down the traditional, get a great education, work for a great firm. But you chose a different path, which we'll get into. Yeah. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts overall are on college.
My reaction when you ask that question, and the feeling that comes up for me, is this idea of creating space in your life to think, to wonder, and to be curious. And I think college is an environment in order to do that. Great ideas, great relationships, great socialization, great failures often happen in the protected space of an institution of higher learning. So my reaction wasn't so much about, the academics of college and what you learn in college in class, but more about the free space to try things in and around an institution that is purpose-built for experimentation. And I think that's valuable.
I got it. Because if you didn't have that container in which to do it, you'd go into some job and you would miss that chance.
And maybe feel anxious about it because the perception is there's more on the line now, right? This is my job, my job, my career. I'm reporting to somebody. And that comes with its own stress.
Yep, for sure. I believe that where people live is really important. Their surroundings are important because they spend a lot of time there. You chose to live on Mercer Island in Seattle. Is there something particular about living there that lends itself to leading or living the life that you want to live?
The motivation to move back to Seattle, which we can talk about a bit later, but to move from where we were living in Seattle in an area called Green Lake to Mercer Island was really driven by the desire to create more of a neighborhood connection and a feeling of connectivity to a community, which we didn't feel as much in Seattle. And the second was to have a good public school option for our children. Mercer Island also has a high percentage of Jews living on the island. And I think that just gets more to that feeling of community and connectivity that we really appreciated.
Is Seattle, coming from New York, everybody's Jewish, but I recognize that the rest of the world isn't that way. Is Seattle a very Jewish city, or are there just pockets?
I think if you look at the statistics, you will find that Seattle has a very high relative percentage of Sephardic Jews, which is curious. So no, it's not going to feel like it does in New York, but there are a number of thriving congregations.
Why do you think Sephardic Jews wound up in Seattle?
I don't know the answer to that.
Isn't that interesting, though?
It is.
It is. We're gonna have to Google that. We're gonna have to.
It's funny, Rob, because my mother's from Montgomery, Alabama, and there was a very high percentage of Sephardics in Montgomery. You're like, what? Like the South? There was a Sephardic congregation in Montgomery, and I think it's more about where people begin to congregate and then just draw or attract others. And my family was in Seattle, has been in Seattle for 4 generations. And over time, it probably created a bit of a magnet for other Sephardics.
Yeah, right. It sort of grows. I want to compare investment banking versus entrepreneurship. So why did you make the decision to leave, sort of the parent pleasing job of investment banking into the risky world of entrepreneurship? What was the thought process behind that?
I come from a family of entrepreneurs. You asked me at the beginning of the call about Jack Benaroya. Jack was a real estate entrepreneur. My grandfather, Ralph Benaroya, who came to Seattle first and set up a business as a beer distributor right after Prohibition, and a business that my dad and his brother took over and then ultimately sold, was very entrepreneurial. So I always had this desire to want to do something on my own, and this feeling like if I didn't test myself when I had relatively few obligations, like a family, I would regret not going for it. And I thought to myself, the worst thing that could happen is that I then have to go find a job, right? Is that I'm an utter failure and I have to go find a job. But if I don't do it, if I don't get on the other side of the table and truly realize what it means to go from nothing to something, that I would have missed an opportunity and an urge and a desire to exercise this interest I had in being an entrepreneur.
Coming from a family of entrepreneurs, why did you choose the, quote, safer educational route versus just jumping right into entrepreneurship in the first place?
Probably because the influence of my parents, who wanted to see me do some of those things that maybe they didn't do, made it without question that, yes, of course, I'm going to go to college. I mean, my parents went to college, but my dad went immediately to go work with his dad in the beer distribution business. I think my parents thought that if I anchored with a solid platform of education and work finance acumen, that it would create more opportunities for me if I decided to pull the entrepreneurial trigger. So I didn't really consider that I wouldn't go and do those things. I think it took me getting out into the real world to reflect on my life and say, okay, what am I really doing?
And plus it was in your DNA. I mean, there was no way around this for you. Like you can have all the degrees in the world, but that hustle was hardwired in you genetically.
Hustle. Yeah.
So this one is going to be a little tough to encapsulate, but could you tell us why you decided to create REM Medical? And then on the complete opposite side of that, what did it feel like when you sold it? So why did you want to create it? And what did it feel like after you sold it?
In 2004, I was working for a private equity firm. We acquired a business in Phoenix, Arizona that had a portion of their business selling these CPAP devices for patients with sleep apnea. That's a therapeutic device for people with sleep apnea. And I thought to myself, that is the most interesting business. I'd never really thought about how the health risks for people when they sleep. And, it looks like there's a lot of really good economics in this industry. And the appeal to healthcare and helping people felt really purposeful for me. And usually it's a series of coincidences and serendipity for which the stars align to even start a business in the first place. So a buddy of mine from business school, Eric Page, got kind of excited about the idea. And then I happened to meet a physician in Seattle who was a renowned sleep medicine doc. And before you know it, there was energy to go for it and do this. And we were basically two guys and two cell phones and two laptops sitting at a desk and saying, okay, we're starting a sleep medicine company. And part of it is just the whirlwind of opportunity and possibility. I don't think we were overly analytical about it. We were just really hungry to try this and see where it goes. And we dove in. And I think diving in sometimes is necessary, because if you overanalyze a situation too much, you probably wouldn't do anything, frankly, because you can always find reasons to not start.
Yeah, for sure.
Not go. Selling the business, the circumstance of selling the business was a little bit, the business was a little bit distressed. We had built a profitable business, not wildly profitable. We were coming into the recession and we were starting to observe that our referral activity was going down a little bit. And there were some regulations that were changing that we thought would put at risk our facilities, because a lot of the business was moving to home-based diagnostics. And so we thought that we would be better suited to be part of a bigger footprint, a bigger company, than trying to go it alone. So that was a long and arduous 9-month process to find a buyer and negotiate a deal. And no question that when we finally signed those papers, it was a humongous relief. I had a bunch of personal guarantees on assets of the business, as did my partner. So I think we were just ready to take a breath. We felt pretty exhausted.
Did you feel excited when you got the check and it was over?
Yes and no. A lot of the consideration for the transaction was in equity in the business that acquired us. And so it really didn't feel like
an exit.
It didn't feel like an exit. It felt like a continuation of a journey, but one in which we were not on the hook day to day. And that day to day on the hook in a business that's, moderately precarious, puts a lot of stress on your family, on you. And we're pretty tired.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. It's interesting. I actually have a little bit of an experience with sleep medicine. It was only recently somebody had recommended. One of the guys created a wearable. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called a Whoop. And this guy from Harvard came up with this thing. And one of the things it measures is how much deep sleep you get. And every morning I'd look down at this thing and, it says I got 6 minutes deep sleep, 7 minutes. This is the slow wave stuff, the SWS. And my wife's got an hour and a half. My friend Darren's got an hour and 20 minutes. And so it just kept going on. And I went to a sleep place and, they said, we're going to put you in this bed at night and we're going to strap you in. And, I was like, I never knew that there was sleep medicine. I never even heard of it. So, it's really, really interesting. You've said that entrepreneurship has brought you face to face with your greatest hopes and struggles. It is in the most uncertain moments when one asks themselves if they are really made to finish the game. Can you describe what finishing the game means to you?
Sure. This has been getting to that point of being able to articulate that statement you reflected back to me has been a big part of the journey. And the big part of the journey is being able to say, when there are 30 seconds left in the game and it's fourth down and you're maybe feeling a little bit behind and you're not sure if you're going to win or not win the game, great athletes are not on the field thinking about the next game. They are in the moment, in the play, and they're going to make the best play in that moment at that fourth down without thinking about what the game is next week. And the idea of saying, I am going to finish this game, whatever that means, right? I'm going to go into the huddle. I'm going to make the call for the very best play that we can make. And when this game is over, win, lose, or tie, then I will think about the next game. When we think about the next game, it could be the next career opportunity, it could be the next move, whatever it is. Before we finish the current game, we significantly decrease the probability that we're going to walk off the field with integrity.
Mm-hmm. Makes perfect sense for me, because if you don't know what the end looks like and you don't know how you're going to show up in the end, then you just have this big mess, don't you?
Always a big mess, because you're presumably compromising a standard. And I think sometimes you learn that by walking off the field before you finish the game.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. There's a sports metaphor I'm trying to think of right now where they kind of say, like, leave it all on the fields. That's one of the emotions that are kind of coming up for me. You are now involved with a company called Stride, where you're helping CEOs to, stay in their zone of genius by eliminating, their back office distractions. Can you describe how you're helping people with Stride, and tell me what you mean by their zone of genius?
I'm super energized by Stride. Like, it's so in my genius zone, which we can talk about. And that is this idea that entrepreneurs do not have room to be distracted by anything other than the critical few things that matter in moving their business forward. And for most high growth companies, it is either proving product market fit, that you've built a product that the market wants and will be disappointed if it goes away, or entrepreneurs are very focused on scaling the business, which is selling the business and having an infrastructure to support that growth. Anything other than that, Rob, is a total distraction. And the back office is definitely one of those. If you as a CEO are laboring over your bookkeeper, your HR, your back office systems, your invoicing process, cash collections, you are taking some of your most valuable time, which is valuable, like $1,000 an hour valuable, probably with opportunity cost, and you are putting it towards something that could otherwise be delegated to an expert. So I get a ton of energy when I help an entrepreneur take that distraction off of their plate and keep them focused on the two things that matter. You are either building your product or you are selling your product. Everything else, outsource.
Why are they obsessing and not outsourcing? And why is it so difficult for them to hear? It certainly makes logical sense, right? But most people don't do it. Why is that the case?
Totally. One is awareness and understanding that this arena of highly competent, capable outsourcing exists, and that the technology is available today for very low friction movement of data and information. So it's not like you need somebody to come into your office and haul away a box of bills and things like that. Everything can happen in the cloud. And so a bit of lack of awareness that is an industry that has evolved quite a bit. So one is awareness. Number two is a control factor. A lot of entrepreneurs are capable of a lot of things. And this feeling like, I'm just going to do this. I could just do this. I can build this model. I can input payroll. It's only going to take, 20, 30 minutes. So there's this bit of this control factor. And sure, they could do it. Is it highest and best use? I don't think they're asking themselves, am I spending my time on highest and best use? And if they did, I think they'd get it off their plate as soon as possible.
Yeah. One of the books that I'm assuming we probably both read, Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek, one of the things that he talks about in there is it's not so much, the 10 minutes that you're checking email on Saturday. It's that your brain is now in that email and thinking about it all weekends. So if you don't have any constraints or, some buffers that you put in i.e. having somebody else do it, then you're going to be a little doing it, even if it's 20 or 30 minutes, and you're going to be thinking about it. And that is bandwidth that can be used somewhere else, yeah?
100%. And also, when you decide to do something on your own that could otherwise be delegated, this probably gets to a bit of 4-hour work week, you are depriving somebody else on your team or a vendor partner from being able to do that and learn from that experience. And this is something my partner, Eric Page, and I have been talking about quite a bit lately, that delegation is a gift to help other people in and around you rise to support your goal and vision. Don't deprive them of that by doing it yourself. All
right. Speaking of doing it yourself, this is going to fall into the Meshuggah category. When people think of an investment banker or a private equity or an entrepreneur, either one of these roles that you've been in, they rarely make a picture of an ultramarathoner. Can you tell us what an ultramarathoner is and why you are one?
The strict definition of ultramarathon is any event that is longer than a marathon, so 26 miles. The ultramarathon distances, you typically see them like 50K, which is over about 31, 32 miles, 100K, which is about 60 miles, 100 milers, and 50 milers. Those are typically the ranges of ultras. I got into ultramarathoning probably 7 years ago, and it has tracked very consistently my journey of entrepreneurship. And we can talk about the ups and downs and the highs and lows of being on a trail for 30 hours and not exactly knowing if you're going to finish and how that feels and what that means. But it's also been an opportunity for a bit of escape and solitude, because when you're out there on the trails and nobody's around, it's peaceful. And I think we all find ways to find our peace, whether it's yoga or meditation. I found it out there.
Have you read or listened to Rich Roll's podcast or book, Ultramarathon?
I've listened to a number of Rich Roll interviews.
Okay. Do you like them?
I do. Yeah. He tackled some really thoughtful, vulnerable topics.
Yeah. Really, really interesting, because I'm starting to realize that the few, and there's not many, but I have interviewed a few ultramarathoners, and there is a theme in common with them. They're usually, overachievers. They're looking for that sort of, they're just growing and they're trying to get better. And a lot of, when I think of being out there for 30 miles, 40 miles, whatever it is that you're doing in the heat, it doesn't resonate with me as ever wanting to do it. But the people I know who do it all talk about the peace and the goals, and they sound, the same way. So there must be something magical that you get from it when it's all over. I mean, you've certainly been doing it for 7 years, yeah?
Yeah, it's cool because there is a finish line, right? In a example, 5 years ago, my friend and I ran around Mount Rainier on the Wonderland Trail, self-supported, 93 miles. It took us 33 hours. 16 of those hours were in a crazy rainstorm, like the one rainstorm that occurred in August of that year. And we happened to find ourselves in it. There is a finish because you're going to complete, there is a loop. But what you don't know is what's going to happen between that start line and the finish line. So there's something nice about knowing like what the game is, Rob. Like, when the game's over, and that's kind of nice, right? As opposed to like startups where it's really hard to know, right, when the game is over. So there's a game, okay. You don't know what's going to happen in between, and you realize that you're really not going to start the game until probably about 24, 25 hours into it. And then what happens between then and the end is a bit of who knows, a lot of self-reliance, a lot of mental talk, a lot of nutrition. And that's the gift, because as adults today, we rarely have the opportunity to put ourselves in a position where we may not finish, and to have that excitement of the unknown as an adult, pretty energizing in hindsight.
Yeah.
Energizing in
Well, this goes back to your point of like dragging your tail over the finish line. So I love this. So, okay, so let's flip it a little bit.
Sure.
You made a decision to go to Costa Rica. Why did you decide to move to Costa Rica and live there with your family for a year? What were the steps that sort of led up to it? And then maybe talk a little bit about what it was like there and what you learned from it.
Yeah. And I'm still living there, by the way.
You're in Costa Rica right now?
Well, I happen to be in San Francisco right now, but I'm flying back tonight, and we are returning to Seattle on June 25th. So we're about a little over 10 months in.
Oh, so you're 10 months into your 1 year in Costa Rica plan.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Wow. I'm catching you at such a great time. Okay. Yeah. Tell me.
Yeah. We're in the moment. So my wife and I had, for a number of years, I'm sure like many couples and families, fantasized about this idea of, wouldn't it be great if we had an abroad experience with our kids? And we usually would say something like that, and then it would move on to another topic of like, okay, who's picking up the groceries today? What are we making for dinner? And just the humdrum of life. After I sold Every Move, which was a healthcare technology business that I started after REM Medical, the prospect of starting another business again, from trying to go from nothing to something with an evangelical idea of what the market could need but doesn't exist today, my wife was just not excited about that. Like, Russell's not going to have a paycheck and all of these challenges. And I understood. And I understood because about a year before that, we had been driving in a car together back from Mount Bachelor. We were in Bend, Oregon, and we were listening to this Tony Robbins podcast. And he said something that I turned the radio off, and I said to her, it's interesting. You and I have never really talked about, where do we want to be in 5 years? Where do we want to be in 10 years? And she said to me, Russell, it's because it's never been about us. It's always been about you and what you're doing and your entrepreneurial path and what's going on with you. Like, it's never been about us. We've just kind of been along for the ride. And that just really struck me. And then in October of 2017, we decided to see together a business coach, a life coach that I had been working with. But I said, Melissa, I'd like to go with you, and let's spend a couple of days with this guy. And he posed a question to us, which was, do you want to build a fence around your relationship and create a sacred space for the two of you to be better together? Or do you want to build fences around yourselves as individuals? And if you do, that's okay too, but we should probably talk about what that means for the future of your relationship. So we decided to do the former, which is build the sacred fence around the two of us. And we spent the next month kind of trying to communicate in a different way and connect in a different way. And we revisited this idea of the abroad experience. We came back to the business coach the next month. He said, well, how's it gone this last month? We're like, oh, it's been pretty good. We've kind of been talking about this abroad thing, but we probably can't do it for a couple of years because of kids and all of that. He said, well, why not? And he kept pressing and pressing. And finally, Melissa, my wife, and I looked at each other and we said, yeah, why not? Let's make it happen. Let's go for it. And then we went home that day, and on the cover of National Geographic was the happiest places on earth. Costa Rica was on the cover, and we said, let's
no shit.
For that. Yeah. It was beautiful.
We're gonna dig into that a little bit more, but now I know why Darren insisted that we connect, because you and I are walking similar paths. Mm-hmm. My wife and I just made a decision that we've always wanted to live in Europe. Never did it. We always wanted to learn Italian. So in 35 days, we are flying off to Monaco to begin the journey. And we're spending 4 months. We have a 4-year-old, so it's a little bit difficult. But we're going to spend 4 months living in Europe. So I am really curious to hear, maybe kind of like take me from let's see, what's a good point? Maybe like just, like talk to me about like what led up a couple of weeks before you went, where you're looking at each other going like, are we really doing this? And to you actually landing in Costa Rica and living there.
Well, thank you for sharing what you're planning to do. It gives me the chills. I have so much excitement for you and so glad you're doing it.
Thank
awesome.
You. Yeah.
And you're taking a leap into the unknown, but you will figure it out as you always do.
Yep.
And I think we had to come to that level of comfort that we will figure it out. We always do. I don't know how it's all going to go down, but if we have the confidence that we'll be able to find our path, we should be confident taking the leap. And when I talk to people, as you probably do too, that are say something like, oh my gosh, we could never do that. I can't believe you're doing that. We could never do that. I'm thinking to myself, no, you absolutely can. Right? The question is just what is the box that you put yourself in that gives you the feeling that you can't? And we were not going on some sabbatical. Like this is not some retirement. I am still working. I still want and need to generate revenue. And so moving to Costa Rica was a bit of a forcing function for me to redefine the way that I wanted to live my life and how I wanted to earn income and do something that I could do with geographic independence, which we can talk about in a little bit. But this idea that I need to be able to have a livelihood that is independent of where I live was super important for me. So the days and months leading up to the move was about reorienting my life and livelihood around geographic independence. And the steps to get there to the point of actually leaving was really like a startup, Rob. It was a project plan with
I bet. I'm in it right now. I got a big Post-it on the wall saying, bring 5 pairs of underwear.
I love it. In fact, Rob, I'll send you a link to a post that I wrote on my personal site, which was titled, How Asana Saved My Marriage. Asana is a project management application.
Yeah, we use it.
I talk about Asana in the context of preparing us for this move because it was like a startup. It was a series of actions and tasks that were necessary to achieve the goal. And for us, the goal was get down here, enroll in a language immersion program because we wanted to learn Spanish, have a landing place for a month where we lived at the school, use our time at the school to get our kids enrolled in proper school, find a place to live, and get ourselves situated so that after that first month was finished, we could start to live day to day.
All right. So I'm gonna be interrupting you as you're going through this because I have a million questions I don't want to forget. Your children are how old?
14 and 12.
How much pushback did you get from them when they wanted to do this idea? When you wanted to do this idea, were they considered as being inside of that fence or were they out of the fence?
They were on the fence. Here's a hint or a little secret for your listeners. If you're ever going to drop like big news to your kids that you're highly confident they will not receive well, do it in public. So they can't like run away to their rooms and start bawling. So we went and had dinner at the Cheesecake Factory and I brought my laptop with me and I had a presentation created and I walked them through my presentation and we got to the last slide, the crescendo, the culmination, the we're going. And all of a sudden I saw my daughter's eyes just start to well up and she was so upset and scared. And then what we did is we spent the next 3 weeks with big white sticky pads of paper on our windows in our living room of our house. And we had like a pros and cons title on the sticky pads. And we would spend the next couple of weeks just writing up there like, hey, here are the pros, here are the cons. And then we'd step back and we'd look together as a family and say, hey, do the pros outweigh the cons? And over that couple of weeks, they started to soften and realize, yeah, this is going to be hard and I'm going to lose my, go away from my friends and all that. But I see that there are pros here. They just didn't, it's hard to feel it when you're that age.
All right. So we fast forward and you get on the plane, you're in the school for a month. You got the kids in, sort of proper schools. And that was, I guess, 8 months ago, something like that.
Yep.
What has, maybe kind of give it to me in 3 chunks. Like, what was it like when you first got there? Did it meet expectations, exceed expectations, et cetera? What was it like in the middle of, the last 7 or 8 months? And what's it feel like now?
So when we first got there, I am by nature a connector, and I like building relationships with people. I'm very curious. And so I spent a lot of time leading up to leaving, creating contact points in Costa Rica where they were actually looking forward to meeting me, and vice versa. And so there was this pent up anticipation of all of these people we had connected with that live there or run businesses there, that I was eager and excited to meet. What's really cool, Rob, is that I've been a 11-year member of the Entrepreneur organization, EO, and there is an EO chapter in Costa Rica with about 60 members. And so I had this kind of ready-made network to plug into and meet. And that gave me a lot of comfort. So what really exceeded expectations was the warmth and the embrace of welcoming our family to the country. It's a small country. There are not a ton of expats, and many of the expats run professional divisions of major multinationals. And so we were meeting these young couples with families, and they were just excited to meet another family. So totally exceeded our expectations, like fast friends, immediate friends. The middle period's been challenging. I have a daughter who is transgender, and that was a process that we were working through when we went down to Costa Rica, and when she was in Costa Rica, and being at a school that's pretty conservative in a country that's pretty conservative. And I will say, that's been really challenging. And we've been lucky in some ways to have a bit of a protected space to work together as a family, but stressful. It's hard to see your child not find their people or have a lot of friends. And so I say it's been the best year of my life, but the best year of my life doesn't mean it hasn't been without challenges.
And the challenges are more, particularly for your daughter, because the environment there is not quite as understanding, accepting, et cetera, as it would be, let's say, if you were here.
Sure, yeah. And they don't speak the language fluently, and so that creates some barriers. So yeah, it's been really, really hard, but it's also been a gift because, listen, challenges exist for any 14-year-old, regardless.
Of course.
So just having the opportunity to work through this in Costa Rica has been great, but real stuff and challenging. But hey, we're in Costa Rica, so I feel great about that. And then what does it feel like now? We're in a great place now. When we made the decision that we were going to return to Seattle, which I did not want to do, but realized that as a family, it was a good decision for all of us. The task has been, Rob, to take all of the things that make me feel so good about being there, and make me feel so good about myself, that we made that decision, we took that leap, and how I feel day to day, and the relative simplicity of my life, and say, okay, can I bottle those feelings up? And independent of where I live, I can still live consistent with those feelings. And that's the work of these last the last month and these next couple of months, which is bottling up those feelings and making sure that I can take them with me when we go back to Seattle.
Is the relationship stronger between you and your wife, and is the family dynamic closer having done this?
100%. The consistency with which we have dinner together is notable. The way that we talk about our life decisions as a family is something that I didn't experience growing up. And so the inclusiveness, now they are inside the fence, to answer your question. And my kids are definitely inside the fence. And it's really forced my wife and I to tackle some very real topics and work together as partners to navigate as a team.
Absolutely incredible. Now, are you just as excited to return back to Seattle, or do you wish that you extended it even more?
Both. I wish that I extended it more, but I am excited because I have control over the story that I tell myself. I could tell myself a story, which is, oh, we're going back. We were only here for a year, kind of like we're going back with our, it was a quasi-failed experiment. Like, man, I wish it could be longer. Like, I thought it was, the beginning of like, oh, we're never going back. It's awesome. Or I could tell myself the story of, we committed to a year. We gained all of this really unique insight about ourselves, about our family, about our environment. And now I am excited to go back in a different capacity, as a different person, as if I am not going back, but as if I am going toward a place that I have been before. And it is that mindset which is really exciting for me, because it's work. It's hard to get there, but I'm enjoying the process.
Yeah, that's fulfillment, which kind of leads me to the last part of the show, which is I want to ask you a couple of questions about, these questions are going to be all in left fields, but they're all sort of like related to fulfillment in one way or another. Are there any positions or opinions in the last few years, or it could be way back, it doesn't have to be in the last few years, that you've changed your mind about substantially, where you're like, I used to think this way, but now I'm not so sure. Now I think this way. Anything come to mind there?
It's funny, instinctual answer when you ask that. So I told you I was in the sleep medicine business for many years.
Yep.
What you experience in sleep is that there is a very high percentage of obesity with sleep patients. And frankly, we have a major obesity problem in our country, as you know. Yeah. General health and wellness. And while I might not have said it explicitly, I kind of always had this sort of chip that would say like, hey, you're in control. You should be able to theoretically make better decisions.
Put down the cupcake. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, put down the cupcake, right? And the truth is that I think where I've really shifted my mindset is leading with empathy. That here's the thing, Rob. I have no idea what's going on in those people's lives, what's going on in their day, what's going on at home, what's going on at work, what's going on inside of them, what's going on with their genetics. And so I think my decisions have been about not passing judgment and leading with empathy as one of my standards.
Oh, that's such a great answer. If you could spend 1 month anywhere in the world other than Costa Rica, where would it be and why?
New Zealand. I have not been to New Zealand. I close my eyes and have this vision of New Zealand meeting so many of the aspects that give me energy, which is largely in the outdoors and the mountains and running and this feeling of freedom. And I would love to experience it.
If you can only go to one restaurant before you die, where would your last meal be?
There's a great taco restaurant on Capitol Hill called Tacos Chucky, and it's a total dive. And I'm not a foodie, And I just love it because it makes my kids so happy when we go there, and I'm frugal and it's awesome food.
I love it. I love it. Okay, the rapid fire round is answer as quickly or as slowly as you'd like. It's basically a first thing that comes to mind round. What would your friends say is one of your superpowers?
Curiosity.
What's one of the things you're afraid of right now?
My own stories.
What keeps you up at night?
Security.
What do people never ask you, but you wish they did?
What inspires me?
What book have you reread the most?
15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership by a guy named Jim Detmer.
Never heard of that one. Okay. What's your guilty pleasure?
Game of Thrones.
Did you see last week? Did you see last week?
You know what? It's so scary. I haven't yet because I've been on a business trip and it's killing me.
Okay. You need to be lock the doors, get under the blanket, and just tell everybody in your house, you do not disturb me for the next 90 minutes. Okay?
I'm stoked.
What is the one thing that you probably should throw out, but never will?
Probably this lime green pair of Adidas shorts I had when I was 6 years old that I used to dress my teddy bear that I just cannot seem to get rid of because it floods back all these memories. I remember wearing them and it's like holding on to my childhood. It's the one thing.
I love it. Okay, we're going to change things up for the last question. What one question would you like to ask me?
What scares you?
My health. My health.
Why?
Because I have a very, very difficult time embracing my mortality. The thought, I'm 52 years old and I have a 4-year-old. I also have a 20-year-old. And, we made the decision when my wife was 40 that we were going to have another child. And when you're, in your 50s and you have a baby, you start doing the math and you start to realize that you're not going to be here forever. And so the anxiety, the fear, the thing I worry about the most is falling sick with, as an example, cancer or something like that, that would not allow me to be here for my family. So, but I also know that we attract these things. So, I do this dance of not thinking of it, but I'm really thinking of it, but I'm trying to visualize health and, do all the right things. But I would say that is probably the only thing that keeps me up. And I have to just, manage my emotion around.
May I ask you a quick follow-up on that?
Yeah, of course.
There's physical health and there's mental health. Do you do anything as a ritual in the morning or any time during the day that you have found to be powerful for your mental health?
Yeah. So 5 out of 7 mornings a week, I've got a protected hour. And in that hour, I do 20 minutes of meditation, which is effectively a transcendental type meditation. The last 5 to 8 minutes of that meditation is really a visualization on, what I'm working on. So, for example, I'm going to Italy now, so I'm visualizing, what I want that to look like. So it's probably 15 minutes meditation, 5-10 minutes-ish of visualization of, what I want to manifest. And then I will go into something called the morning pages for 20 minutes where I journal 3 full pages, flow of consciousness, stream of consciousness, whatever's in my mind, I journal for the garbage can. I just get it out. If you looked at it, it looked like Jeffrey Dahmer wrote it. It's crazy time. And I just get it all out. I'm fat, I'm skinny, I'm rich, I'm poor. Why am I such an idiot? Why am I so great? Like crazy things that come out. By the time I get to like the second page, I start gaining clarity, and it's like I call it like dusting getting the dust out of the carpet, which allows me to embrace the day with a clearer head when I eject that cash that's in the RAM. And then I do 20 minutes of reading. And right now I'm reading a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. So I call it like 20.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah, it's really good. 20. That's my morning ritual. I swear if I didn't do that, I would be miserable to be around.
Love it. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Well, listen, this, honestly, no BS, has been one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done. And I know that there's no accident that we met. And I am just so grateful that, I know that this is not your thing. You're not doing the podcast circuit. You're not selling the product. You're not selling the book. You're doing this because you're doing it as a favor and you're sharing what you've learned. So I am super grateful that you were willing to take the time. And I'm just really, I know we just met here, but I'm so proud of the decision that you made. It takes freaking balls to do what you're doing. I mean, it just does. So my hat's off to you, and hopefully someone listening will be inspired as well. Do you have any final words, suggestions, or an ask for the people that are listening?
I think the ask is to challenge yourself to take the leap and know that, and have the confidence that you will figure it out, and really break out of that self-limiting sentiment that most of us spend our day in and do something unexpected.
Well, Russell, that is a great note to leave on. Thank you again. Enjoy San Fran. Safe trip to Costa Rica, and let your family know you're a podcast star now.
Awesome, man. And if you need anything from me leading up to your trip, please reach out. Anything I can do for you, I will.
Will do. Talk soon. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks for listening. If you love this episode and you know someone that needs some help in either stepping up their work hard game or their play hard game, it would mean the world to me if you shared this podcast with them to help me get this movement out there. So if you like what you heard, head on over to iTunes, take 30 seconds, and leave me a 5-star review, and I will be forever grateful. So until the next episode, excuses are over. It's time to live.